should you read Get Programming with Go? I'll be reviewing the book to let you know my answer. Hi, I'm Jonathan Hall, and I'm still looking for the best book in 2023 to learn Go. I've had a number of people suggest Get Programming with Go, so I decided to buy a copy and review it. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So this book did not meet my original selection criteria, primarily because of its publication date. I was looking for books published in the last year to year and a half because I really wanted them to cover the topic of generics and other new concepts that have been added to the Go language recently. But because of a number of requests to review this book, I've decided to add it to my collection, even though it's a little bit older than that. It was published in 2018, so it's actually 4 or 5 years old. But it's gotten enough positive attention that I thought it was worth including in this series. So I'm going to dive into that one. So let's start with who the book is for, as always. This book is clearly written for beginners. In fact, I would say this is the most beginner-focused book I've reviewed so far. The opening of the book says, if you've ever used a scripting language like JavaScript, Lua, PHP, Python, or Ruby, you're ready to learn Go. If you've used Scratch or Excel formulas or written HTML, you're not alone in choosing Go as your first, quote, real programming language. So it's aimed at beginners. In addition, the content and a few other characteristics of this book really make it solidly in the camp for beginners. I would say beginners to programming in general. I don't think you need experience programming at all to understand and read this book. Having said that, if your goal is to pick up Go as a second or third language, or you're already a professional developer, you could probably skip this book. It's going to be too basic for you, and there are just better books out there if that describes you. One of the clearest signs that this book is not really intended for professionals or serious developers is that every example in the book is designed to be executed in the Go Playground, which is a website that lets you run Go code. I love the Go Playground. I use it in my videos all the time. It's a great place to just hack out some Go code and try something. But you can't really write large or serious programs in the Go Playground. And then the book doesn't even talk about how to install Go locally. In fact, it's only the very last page of the book that mentions that you can and gives a link to go download it, but it just doesn't talk about that in this book. So it's clearly not intended for people writing serious or professional Go projects. It's really intended sort of as just an introduction to the surface level concepts in Go. So if that describes you, this could be a good book. Let's get into some more details, though. So the style, the writing style, narration style of this book is very light. It's a fun style. There's cartoons throughout the book. And the examples are kind of silly and fun. So it makes for really light reading. It's easy to read. It's easy to understand and get through. Many of the code samples, as you can see here, also have comments with arrows pointing directly to what they're talking about, which makes it really easy to tell the context of the comments. So that's really beginner-friendly sort of commentary in the book. Most of the sections of the book have this little sort of robot icon. It's kind of fun. And then the end of each section, or many sections, have a sort of quick check, self-quiz type of thing that just asks you about some of the main themes in that section to help refresh your memory. So it's clearly designed for beginners. It's a beginner-friendly book, and that's great. The organization of this book just continues that theme. It's designed to be read from cover to cover, with each lesson building on the last. And if you read the book as intended from cover to cover, you will get a reasonable understanding of the core concept of the Go language. You get a nice introduction to what Go can do, what it feels like to use Go. That does mean that this is not a good reference material, really. Of course, there is an index and a table of contents, but there's just not a lot of content in this book. A lot of the concepts aren't mentioned here, which we'll talk about in a moment. But you're not really intended to use this as reference material. A reference book would need to be much more thorough than this. This is really just a brief introduction to Go. And for that purpose, I think it does a reasonable job. So let's talk about the content. The content of this book is light. It's very light on content. I think that's okay, given the intention of the book, the target audience. It really isn't an in-depth discussion of Go or teaching you how to write high-performance code or microservices or whatever. It's not intended for that. This is really intended for a beginner, probably a beginner programmer, certainly one who's not very experienced. Maybe you've learned a little bit of some other language. But if that describes you, then this book could be okay. Again, it's light on content. There's a lot of material that's not covered in this book. In fact, the last section of the book has a listing of things that are not in the book. Things like bitwise operations are not covered. How to create packages or even use packages are not covered. Complex numbers, which few people use. Several of the core built-in functions in the language and other identifiers aren't mentioned. Go to, iota, continue, new, copy, probably some others. And there's just a lot of things that aren't covered. Also, key to this review series, the main things I'm looking for in a beginner's book to Go aren't covered here. Specifically, Go modules are not covered. I'll talk more about that in a second. The testing package is not covered at all. And of course, this book is old, so generics aren't covered. That's the reason I didn't include it initially. But so no surprise that it's not covered, but it's not. Having said that, given the intended audience of an absolute beginner, I don't think it's actually that serious of a problem. I mean, if I'm imagining somebody who's never programmed before, and they're just trying to get a feel for what's programming like, and should I learn Go or maybe JavaScript or something like that, those things are much less important. Go modules maybe being the exception, which again I'll talk about in a moment. But at that level, nobody cares about generics. Nobody cares about the testing package. So I don't want to make this sound like a criticism of the book. It doesn't necessarily meet my criteria that I'm looking for, but that doesn't make it a bad book. All right, accuracy. I'm going to have some fun on this part. I actually didn't find any factual Go errors in the book. I didn't read it cover to cover. But I found a nitpick I'm going to pull out just because I feel like it. In Code Listing 2.1, we have a conversion for calculating your weight on Mars, which will be really useful if you get to migrate to Mars with Elon Musk's fleet of spaceships, right? And there's a little note that says, Listing 2.1 displays weight in pounds. The chosen unit of measure doesn't impact the weight calculation. Whichever unit you choose, the weight on Mars is 37.83% the weight on Earth. That is, of course, technically true. I didn't check those numbers, but I'm assuming that the numbers are correct. But so that's technically true, assuming the numbers check out. But of course, many of us here on Earth weigh ourselves using kilograms rather than pounds. And kilograms actually isn't a measurement of weight; it's a measurement of mass. So if you use kilograms as a proxy for a weight measure, those calculations are going to be off. So I'm really sorry to disappoint any of you who are planning to migrate to Mars and you weigh yourself in kilograms. You're not going to be able to just move to Mars and lose a bunch of weight. Sorry about that. All right, back to something a little more serious. The physical characteristics of this book, I don't know. I actually ordered a physical copy on Amazon, and when it didn't come 3 days later, I went back and checked my order and realized it was coming in March. Like, I'm not going to wait that long. So I canceled my order and I went over to Manning and I just bought the PDF version of the book. So that's what I read. Now, as I said in a previous review of Learn Go with Pocket-Sized Projects, which is also published or will be published by Manning, that book isn't actually released yet. I've read other Manning books before, and they're always high quality. So I don't have any reason to think that this one isn't also high quality. I did look at Amazon's Look Inside feature, and it shows black and white pages, although the PDF is in color, as you can see. I don't think that's a problem. Both the color and the black and white are attractive and readable. There's no reason for that to be a deterrent. Although if you really like the color, you could get the PDF version also from Manning. Now, this book is, because it's more beginner-focused than the others, it's heavier on illustrations, as I've already mentioned. There's gopher cartoons throughout. There's little icons and things like that. It's more white space than many of the other books, so it's a little bit less dense, even considering the page count. But no expected problem with the book. Physically, it should be great. So what's my conclusion? Well, I think you can guess. This book clearly stands out as geared towards beginners in ways that the majority of the other books don't. In fact, I would say this is the most beginner-focused of all the books I've reviewed so far. Coming in probably next is Go Programming Language for Dummies. It's also for beginners, but is a little bit more technical. So if you're an absolute beginner, maybe this is the book for you. My biggest complaint about this book is that everything in the book is designed for the Go playground. And that just really means that you're not going to read this book and be able to use the Go language really. You're certainly not going to be capable of writing professional level Go programs, but you're not really even going to be able to use it for silly home projects if you want to. You just need to be able to write code with multiple files, multiple packages, and you need to install the local Go compiler, and you need to know how to use modules for that. So that's my biggest complaint about this book. If you don't care about that, and really the only thing you want to do is sort of get a sense for if Go feels right to you, then this might be a good book. if that describes you and you're really just looking to get a sense of the Go language and you don't really want to commit much time or money to it, I probably would just send you over to the Tour of Go, which is at go.dev/tour. It's an interactive sort of tutorial about some of the concepts of Go, and it uses the Go playground, so it's interactive. You can actually type in your own code and run things. I would probably encourage someone to take that route rather than reading this book. Of course, if you prefer the book for some reason, fine, buy the book. Otherwise, I would probably skip this book. I think it's just too basic and not complete enough to really give you what I think you need to become a Go developer. So that's my conclusion on this one. I have one more book to do, and then I'm going to give you my summary, my final conclusions to tell you what is the best book in 2023 to read to learn Go. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you'll be notified when that video comes out. And until then, boldly go.